Hi BookTube, and welcome to a new video on an absolutely sweltering day. This is my Friday Reads recorded on a Thursday. Two books completed this week. Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen, Canadian writer. I think this is her debut. And Trent Dalton's follow-up to his very popular Boy Swallows Universe last year. This is called Our Shimmering Skies, Trent Dalton being an Australian author. I'm going to start with the Emily Watson. So I first saw this on Andrea at Infinite Text channel. She was reviewing it, and Andrea is one of my favourite booktubers because of her Death Shelf project, because like me she's fairly fascinated with all things mortality, and obviously with a title like Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, how could I not be attracted to this novel? I give this 4 stars, a solid 4 stars. And in doing so, which I'll come to at the end of my talking about this, I realise quite now what I mean by 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars reads, because I sort of always did it intuitively, but actually having read this book and the John McGregor book Lean Fall Stand last week, which is also 4 stars, it clarified for me what my criteria are. But anyway, we'll get to that. So Gilda is a 20-something Canadian woman who is a lesbian in a relationship, and she has a reasonably dysfunctional family. The son, her brother, is alcoholic, but the parents won't seem to acknowledge this. So whenever Gilda tries to bring it to their attention that he needs help, they bat it away and sort of fixate on her failings. But Gilda herself is a hypochondriac. They all know her at the local hospital, and they sort of greet her with a sort of, what is it this time, kind of triage. And her life really isn't going anywhere. And she starts, and the reason for that is because she's always full of morbid thoughts. And again, I want to return to quite what that means later. Now, if you have sort of morbid thoughts on a daily basis, it doesn't necessarily mean suicide. It just means you can't get the thought of your own death, non-existence, out of your head. There seem to be 2 ways of kind of dealing with that. One is to think there is no purpose or meaning in life. What's the point in doing anything, in building anything, in creating anything, in achieving anything, even in relationships, let alone, leaving something of value to the world. So it's a sort of, a sort of suppressive, depressing effect that you can't really get yourself together to go out and try and achieve things. Or it goes the other way, which is sort of the existentialist, sort of French existentialist way, which is, oh, screw it, if we're all going to die anyway, I don't care if I live or die, I'm just going to do maximum things that, potentially could give me pleasure in the here and now, and screw it if that means other people get hurt or penalised, if they get in the way. So it seems to me those are, broadly the 2 directions it can take. This is definitely the former. This is a sort of depressive, drifting, aimless sort of response by Gilda. But it's funny, because she ends up sort of landing a job in a Catholic church, where straight away she is repressing the fact that A, that she's an atheist, and B, that she's a lesbian, because the Catholic Church wouldn't approve. And she takes over the job of an elderly lady who was a sort of the church secretary who died. And no one knew how to sort of even open emails and stuff. So the first thing she does is open emails, and she sees there's some personal emails to this dead lady from another elderly lady in another state in Canada or the US, where I can't remember where this is set. And she sort of creates this fantasy of the dead woman that she's replacing, but also the woman at the other side of the country, just from these emails. And in the end, of course, she gets sucked in and starts replying to them in the guise of the old lady, because no one's told her friend that this old lady has died. So that's the first thing, that she sort of winds up in this very improbable sort of job and environment of the Catholic Church, where she has to sort of keep her true self hidden. And as a corollary of that, an eligible bachelor is sort of introduced to her with the aim that she should really be married by now and having kids. And this guy is absolutely insufferable. He's a sort of a new age life coach. Everything's relentlessly positive, the complete opposite of her. So again, she finds herself sort of manipulated into this situation of A, going on dates with this guy when she's a lesbian, and obviously she doesn't tell her girlfriend, and B, sort of having this, feeding his ego by sort of agreeing with him that always take the positive outlook on life, and clearly, she doesn't whatsoever. And as I say, there's lots of sort of stuff, because she has no real control over her life, or elects not to really make any decisions. She keeps getting into these rather absurd situations, like in the church, like with the suitor. And it's enjoyable, it's very funny. And it sort of smacked a bit of Atesha Moshfegh's Eileen, but not quite as self-abasing as that was, because there's some deeply unpleasant sort of self-abasement in that, which isn't in here. This is more sort of drift. The worst that she does really is, the way she genuinely, she's in a car crash through no fault of her own and has a cast on her arm. That's about the worst that happens to her, and that wasn't even her fault. So I'm just going to read a couple of things to give you an idea of A, the style, which I think is very entertaining, and B, coming back to this notion of the morbid thoughts, because in between all the sort of the plot and the sort of drifting into sort of slight strange situations and having to fake it, there are sort of reflections and morbidity and stuff. But I'm going to start with just an example of the style, why I sort of enjoyed this book. So she's talking about online dating apps and stuff, which is how she ended up meeting her girlfriend. All of the conversations I was having with my matches were similarly dull. I'm not well versed in small talk, and every conversation felt the same. We would tell each other what our jobs were, compliment each other's photos, and ask each other insipid questions until someone finally stopped replying. I was lying on my kitchen floor, mindlessly swiping through profiles, having the same conversation over and over. "What's your mum's maiden name?" Eleanor messaged me. I started to reply but stopped. I scrolled up in our messages and reviewed the questions she'd asked me. I thought, wait, is this person trying to steal my identity? She'd asked me all the questions required to access my email or bank account. The more I thought about it, the more I convinced myself she was a scam artist. I gave her a fake name. I said Kenny. She kept messaging me. Even though I thought she was trying to access my bank account, I kept replying. I figured I don't have any money to steal anyways, and was excited to be liberated from the pressure of establishing any romantic rapport. I no longer cared if I'd said something stupid or weird. If she was a stranger motivated to scam me, who better to burden with my conversation? I asked her, "What do you think the point of life is?" She said, "I'm still trying to figure that out." I said, "Do you ever think about space and black holes?" She replied, "Yes, all the time." So that turned out to be the introduction to her girlfriend, Eleanor, before they actually met in the flesh. So it's that level of humour, the fact that, she sort of twists the questions that in fact this girl's just asked her personal details to steal her identity. So, I love that sort of tone, slight flippancy to it throughout all the book. Now, this is the bit of the book that let me down, which is the morbid thought stuff. And as I said, I think about it a lot every day. I would say it actually plagues me, thoughts of my morbidity, of my mortality. To such an extent, I've written a novella trying to explore, trying to write my own death, which is a really kind of hard thing to get your head around. But anyway, so that's why I was really interested in this book. Is this book going to give me any more insights into the nature of mortality and thinking about it every day and how that reflects back on the purpose of life and stuff? And it doesn't. It's very basic on that level. So, these are some of her thoughts. "I will never have any hands but these. It's bizarre that a body can be animated 1 second and then turn lifeless permanently. Black. When we die, our bodies are garbage. We rot. Black. I can't believe that I'm alive. Black. I can't believe that I can believe anything. What are you doing?" someone shouts at me from their car. I hear ringing. I look over the bridge into the black water. Is she fishing? She doesn't have any fishing gear. Are you okay? Hey, are you okay? I'm thinking about fishing, I announce. I'm thinking about how it must feel for a hook to snag your cheek and for your body to be dragged into a space where you can't breathe. What if someone outside of Earth thinks of humans as fish? What if aliens drag us out where our heads will pop? Are you okay? He asks me again. I look into the car. There are 2 teenage boys in it. Come over here, one of them says. You're making us nervous. Are you feeling sad? I look into their faces. They are both very young. They were little boys a couple of years ago, I can tell. I'm okay, I tell them. I just went out for a walk. Thank you for asking me. That's very nice of you. You must be nice. Can we call someone for you, he asks. Yes, I nod. Please call 911. And another example of just sort of how she feels insignificant and almost immaterial in the world. So her girlfriend has given her a present. I look at the box, then at her smiling mouth, and time stops. I feel strangely derailed by this gesture. The image of Eleanor committing something I said offhand to her memory, spending her money and gifting me this, makes me feel for some reason heartbroken. I begin to mouth the words thank you and to simulate a smile despite the strange crushing sadness I'm experiencing. I hold the box in my hands, my heart pounding. That's nice of you to remember something I said, I manage to spit out, heat pounding off my face while I try to veil the black bile I feel boiling inside me. I find it so bizarre that I occupy space and that I am seen by other people. I feel like I'm falling through space and Eleanor just threw me a rose. It's such a sweet, pointless gesture. It would be devastating to fall through space alone without someone else falling next to me. However, someone does something nice for me. I feel intensely aware of how strange and sad it is to know someone. She beams. Of course I remember the things you say. So the problem I have, as I say, I didn't really sort of get any great insight into, I've sort of, thought about it and heard it expressed in similar ways about, if man was a fish in the eyes of aliens and all that sort of stuff. It's sort of in the same comic tone as the rest of it, which is absolutely legitimate and consistent, but therefore it's not giving due weight to some very heavy thoughts. And that's the shortcoming of the book. So, I gave it 4 stars because this was an absolutely pleasurable read, but there's nothing to it, really, ultimately. And that with the John McGregor book that I read last week, and I'll post a link to that, and I'll also post a link to Andrea's review of this book, made me realise that 4 stars to me is where it's an absolutely, perfectly fun, pleasurable read, but I take nothing away from it. 3 stars are, I don't even get the pleasure of the read. It's not that great a read, not that pleasurable. 2 stars are dire, and I save 1 star, I give one about every 3 years for a book that's just offensive. And 5 stars are a good read, plus it made me think. It gave me something to take away from the book. And it's also simple now when I think about it like that, but up till now it was just sort of done intuitively, and now I have a schema. Huzzah! So I thank this book for that, if nothing else. And on to a slightly different kettle of fish, Trent Dalton's Our Shimmering Skies. This is 5 stars. And despite what I've just said, it's 5 stars in a way that I don't take any ideas away from this book. I just take away a wonderful reading experience of style, of lyricism, of language, of being exposed to a culture far removed from my own. Beautiful. So superior, I think, to Boy Swallow's universe. It's a bit of the sort of Nick Cave and the As Saw the Angel, sort of Southern Gothic, but where the problem in Nick Cave's book is, Nick Cave being Australian as well, is that he sets it in the heart of the Bible Belt in America, and it's very American Southern Gothic. This is genuinely a Southern Gothic style, but approach to Australia and Australian lit, and is all the better for it, I feel. With Cave, it was a bit more second-hand received, because it's not his innate culture. Anyway, I'm not talking about Nick Cave. So this book starts off with Molly Hook is a 7-year-old girl, although for the bulk of the book she's on the cusp of teenagehood. And she is the only child of a gravedigger's family, of her father, her mother, and an uncle. And it's set in Darwin, which is the most northern city in Australia, just at the point in which the Second World War is going to extend with the entry of the Japanese. Having bombed Pearl Harbor, they then go and bomb Australia, particularly Darwin is the sort of nearest target. So there's sort of sense of impending catastrophe. But Darwin is in the Northern Territories, which has a lot of, outback and bush country where, the Aboriginal indigenous tribes go for their sort of walkabouts and stuff. And Molly Hook's mother dies early on in this, leaving her with her father, who's a pretty weak man, and her uncle, who's called Aubrey Hook, who's very much the Robert Mitchum preacher character in Night of the Hunter, and he's a pretty scary dude. And Molly Hook believes that her family have been cursed by a sorcerer and an elder of an Aboriginal tribe, because her grandfather had gone off gold prospecting and had stolen the gold from this Aboriginal tribal lands, and that this guy had put a curse on them. And Aubrey sort of takes great delight in pointing out to her that no, there's no such thing as a curse. Just some people are born into terrible situations, by which he means abusive situations, because he and his brother are very abusive. They're alcoholics, they're penny pinching, they're thieves, they give her no attention or love or anything. So the whole time it's this balance between, is it a curse, or is it just, people born into dreadful, dreadful circumstances? And Molly, to get away from the terrible Uncle Aubrey, decides that she's going to go on a walkabout, and this is precipitated by the Japanese attack on Darwin, and their graveyard is hit. And the story is, she with a companion who is an actress and the sometime girlfriend of Aubrey, who has her own sort of set of dreams and stuff. They go into the outback and in search of this sorcerer. I need to come back on myself, because there's lots of details that I now want to fill in. The first thing to say is there's a beautiful lyricism of this in its nature writing. It's not a poetic language as such. It's just beautiful observation and detail and metaphors of natural phenomena in the outback, stuff that most of us don't see because they're unique to Australia. And the repetition of motifs and things makes it even more lyrical. So that's the first thing, that you fall in love with the writing, you fall in love with the world being described here. It's a world a million miles away from the war, from cities and from everything. The second thing to say about this is there are motifs of digging underground and things falling from the sky. Obviously the two axes of the world that we operate in. So the things underground, she's a gravedigger, and her family are gravediggers. There's lots of stuff early on about committing bodies to the ground. But also they're gold miners, they're prospectors, or they have a family history of it, which again is digging in tunnels, digging in shafts underground. And those two things are in constant tension throughout the book. And each section of the book is divided up by a new gift falling from the sky. So the first gift her mother tells her has fallen from the sky, but it's actually her mother gives it, which is a prospecting dish, that sieves out stuff until only the gold is left there, which gives her the idea that she's got to go back to the source of this gold that's caused the curse. Another thing that falls out of the sky, of course, are the Japanese bombs that move the situation on. The third thing that falls out of the sky is a Japanese fighter pilot who basically doesn't want to, participate in this, and he deliberately sort of crushes his fighter in the sort of the it's not a desert, but in the outback, and hooks up with these two women on their walk. And another thing that falls out of the sky is a baby, which sounds strange, but basically it's an indigenous baby that has been stolen by a great eagle. But I can't remember exactly now why it drops the baby, and it's rescued by them on their journey. There is perhaps a tinge of magical realism there about it, but it isn't magical realism because nothing is Deus Ex Machina in this, and also it fits into the world building of the Aboriginal landscape and myth and everything. So it's not magical realism. It's absolutely credible within the world that it's set up. And as I say, I was just so totally won over and blown away by this book. I'm going to read two little parts. So this is where she's on the point of wanting to go off into the outback, and her uncle is refusing her. He's sort of caught her in the act of preparing a rucksack of things. "You going somewhere, Molly?" he asks. "You disappearing into the bush again? You about to get yourself lost in the godless wild again?" "I'm going to find Longcoat Bob," Molly replies. Aubrey laughs, the lamp moving in his hand, sending light to new points of darkness. And why, Aubrey shakes his head, piecing his words together slowly, would you seek to find that snaky sorcerer, Longcoat Bob? I'm going to ask him to lift the curse he put on our family, Molly says flatly. Aubrey howls with laughter. Of course, the curse, he says. You still believe in curses, Molly? He nods his head vigorously. He moves closer to her from the shadows. He hisses at her. You still believe in sorcery? She doesn't look at him. He's Medusa from the shadows. Even after everything I've told you about Tom Berry, he says, closer still. How many times do I have to tell you, child, that some children are born into this world destined to lead lives of pure and unavoidable misery? He extends a crooked right forefinger and he taps it hard 3 times on her chest as he says, and you are, tap, quite simply, tap, one of those children, tap. Aubrey turns and tilts his head to the stars. You can't blame Longcoat Bob, he says snidely, waving a finger at the sky. Blame God. Blame your precious sky. Blame your shimmering stars. He turns to Molly. He snarls at her. The shadows snarl. Blame your mother, he says. He laughs, staggers on his feet again. And as I said, he's got a touch of the preacher in Night of the Hunter. Very, very malign sort of character. And Molly has got his number brilliantly because he's interested in gold, not quite so much for the wealth, although that would help because they live lives of sort of dirt penury. But it's the light that gold gives off because he's a shadow. He has no light amidst it, into his body, lights him up. He's perpetually black and sort of light as expunged. And the brief glimmer of gold is what gives him sort of a brief sort of excitation of life and energy. And this is how the book starts. And it's just such a wonderful, wonderful opening. I was smitten by page 3 where this book starts. A bull ant crawls across a curse. The bull ant's head is blood red, and it stops and starts and stops and starts and moves on through a chiselled gravestone letter C. And Molly Hook, aged 7, wonders if the bull ant has ever been able to see the whole of the sky, given all those magic gravity angles bull ants walk. And if it has no sky to see, then she will make a sky for it. The bull ant follows the curved bottom of a U and moves up to an R and winds through a twisting S and exit through an E. Molly is the gravedigger girl. She's heard people in town call her that. Poor little gravedigger girl, mad little gravedigger girl. She leans on her shovel. It has a wooden handle as long as she is tall, with a wide dirt-stained sheet steel blade with teeth on its sides for root cutting. Molly has given the shovel a name because she cares for it. She calls the shovel Bert because those side teeth remind her of the decaying and icicle-shaped fangs of Bert Green, who runs the Sugar Lane lolly shop on Shepherd Street. Bert the shovel has helped dig 26 graves for her so far this year. Her first year digging graves with her mother and father and uncle. Bert has killed a black whipsnake for her. So apart from that being a stupendous angle, I've suddenly realised, sort of in talking about the other book, Everybody in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, she's 7 years old and she's dug 23 graves. I mean, what greater sort of initiation into the world of death is there than that? So just a wonderful book all round. It's possible it's slightly too long. It slightly, pushes at the edges of credibility in some places of this young girl and the journey that she goes on through the outback. But I loved it. 5 stars. Will almost certainly get into my top 10 reads of the year. So that's what I've finished. What I'm currently reading, this is a Blame It on Sean the Book Maniac, Elizabeth Jane Howard, The Beautiful Visit, which he reviewed last week and said that Elizabeth Jane Howard's debut, which this was, elevates her into his pantheon of, writers that he wants to read everything by. I'm only 130 pages into it, so I won't talk about it until I finish it. But that's what I'm reading currently. I also need to get back on track with my mammoths. I didn't finish one in June, and July I didn't plan to read one at all because of my book coming out, but I'm halfway through William Gallus's The Tunnel, and what are we today, the 22nd, so there's still 9 days of July. It would be a challenge because it's not a quick read, but I could finish The Tunnel and get back on track. So there you have it, that's my Friday reads. Thanks very much, till next time.